All right, hello yet again. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to use GitHub in particular with Git. Um, Great. So GitHub, and here's a sort of picture of what GitHub looks like, is a website that stores repos. It basically takes the database, the filing cabinet that we talked about previously and you've previously worked with, and it gives you a place to store that database, right? That set of changes on the internet in a way that people can easily interact with it and find it and navigate through those files. So everything we had done previously was local to your machine, right? There was no internet required. It was just making some changes to files and saving those changes in a database so we could get back to them later. GitHub provides a centralized location where we can upload our Git repositories to for other people to then interact with them. So when a repository is hosted on GitHub, GitHub ends up providing a web portal that looks like this in order to view and explore that repository and that code. So for example, this is a sample repository. It's different than the one we've used previously, but so this is a sample we can work with. First thing you'll notice is that this file is currently stored under my account, under Joel W. Ross. So this is my repository. It's not your repository, it's mine, which means that I have access to it. I'm able to work with it and modify it. The repo itself is called sample repo. So the way we'll refer to this is the Joel W. Ross sample repo because it's my copy of that repository, or it's just the sample repo. That gets awkward, but yeah. You'll notice that it lists all the different files that we can see. The README file is automatically rendered a little bit like a web page, so we can see some information there. We have these folders listing what files are there, which we can then navigate with and view just like any other file system. So for example, I can go inside of the example folder to see what's there, and I can go into example text to see what's there, and I can say, here's the example of some text, right? So I can actually navigate through this almost like its own little file system, similar to you might see in Dropbox or SharePoint or something to that effect. Go back. Great. Okay, so once we've got this repo, all right, the other thing we can do is we actually see the commit history. So we can see when it shows us each file in each folder, it tells us when that file was last changed and what commit made that change. So it tells us that a couple weeks ago when I first set this up, I made a commit change. One of the changes which was adding an example folder. If I click on the commits here, it'll actually then tell me what those changes are and who made them, and even then, like, what's the hash code for these things. So we get a lot of history we can see about how these code has changed over time from that GitHub will sort of display to us cleanly. GitLog will do the same work as well if we need to. All right, so once we have this repository, if we want to make some changes to it, then what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to download this code onto our local machine. So you need to download it to your own computer, edit the code there, commit it on your local machine, and then we can then upload it back to GitHub. We don't actually ever want to make changes directly on the GitHub website. You technically can do that, but we never are going to. It's really bad practice. Don't do it. We want to do all of our changes locally on your own machine. It's the cleanest way of doing things. All right, so in order to, if we have this code on GitHub and we want to access it, work with it, we're going to need to download it. So in order to do that, we're first going to need the URL of this repository. So we need to know basically where we can find it on the internet. So you can get that URL from the status bar, the URL bar of your browser. So that's the URL, github.com/joelwross/sample repo. You can also click this big green clone or download button, in which case it'll then give you the same URL sort of right there. And there's even a button you can click that'll copy it to your clipboard. Whatever you do not click download zip. That's a bad button. Don't do that. Download zip is going to download all the code, but you don't get the filing cabinet. You don't get the database with it. So you don't actually keep track of what changes have been made, which means you can't make further changes to it. So that's good if you just want the code, but we never want that. We also want the history along with it. So don't click that button. That's a bad button. Do not click it. All right, so we're going to get our URL. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to take the thing. I'm going to copy it to my clipboard. Once we have it copied to the clipboard, then we're going to be able to go and get this repository back onto our computer. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to go back and do this on the command line as Git. So because again, all of our Git interaction happens on the command line. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm not currently in a repository, because I don't want to be downloading one repository into another, because remember, we don't want repos inside of other repos. So if I actually run git status here, I can get an error message that I wanted to get, which was that a fatal message, right? This is not going to work at all, that I'm not currently in a Git repository. That's what I want. I don't want to be in a Git repository. I'm in my desktop. With that in place, then what I can do is I can now download this repo from GitHub, and the command I'm going to use to do that is called Git Clone. I'm going to clone the repo that's on GitHub to my local machine. I'm basically going to make a copy of it for me to work with and to make my changes to. So I'm going to write the command git clone. I'm going to paste in the URL of where I want to clone to, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And once I do so, you'll see that it downloads a bunch of data, and it's basically created a bunch of stuff, and it's going to put all this information on my desktop. So if I now run ls and I see my desktop here, you can now see, and I can just open up the desktop. You can see that there's now this new folder, sample repo, which is the repository that I had just downloaded from GitHub. And inside of it, I have that example folder and the README. I have all the content that was on the web, but it's now been downloaded onto my computer. Great. And so again, running clone will create a new repository. It'll create that folder. You don't need to create it for you. You don't need to create it. It does it for you. You also don't need to run git init, because when we download when we clone that repository, we get the filing cabinet database along with it. So I don't need to actually create a new one with git init. I've already got one to begin with. So that's why I said that the git init command doesn't actually get used all that much. All right. So now we've got our folder. We can now cd into it. We can cd into sample repo, which is where I want to be. If I run git status, I can actually see about what things look like. So again, because this is a new repo that's up to date, I haven't made any other changes to it. It says that I'm on branch master. There's nothing to commit. My working tree is clean. It also tells me that I'm up to date with the origin, which is GitHub, which is where I downloaded the thing from. I'm up to date with that remote, so that basically means I have the same set of changes that are on GitHub. Okay, great. So now that we have our local copy of this repository, we can start actually making changes to it. So I can take this folder, for example, and I'm going to open it up inside of Visual Studio Code by dragging the whole folder into Visual Studio. I can go to this README file and I can start filling in some details here. So for example, I can say that my name is Joel. My favorite color is purple. So I can make those changes. I'm going to save that file. So again, I hit Control S to save the file. So you notice my circle is gone. If I go back to my terminal here, I can run git status. And then again, I've now made a change. So after I run, now that I've made a change, I need to add and commit it. That's the same thing I always need to do. So I'm going to do a git add that, git commit-m. I'm going to say that I, maybe this fills out the form. That's what this change does. And now that's all static. That's all ready to go. If I run my status again, you can see that now that it says that there's nothing to commit, my tree is clean, but my branch is now, my current version, right, my version of this is now ahead of Origin Master. I'm now ahead. I have changes that GitHub does not have, and I have one commit, right? I'm one commit into the future than GitHub is. I don't have my stuff. And it tells me how I can resolve this problem. It says that I can use git push in order to take my local commits and upload them to GitHub. And that's exactly what we can do. So once I'm inside this repository, if I run, I can upload them to GitHub by running git push. I want to make sure to note, where did my folder go? There we go. I want to make sure to note that even though I've made that change, even though I committed that change, if I refresh GitHub, you'll notice nothing has changed here, right? I haven't actually uploaded that commit, so GitHub doesn't know about that commit I made, even though I made it locally. So in order to make sure that I can make it locally, I'm going to run my git push command. So when I run git push, I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to get mad at me because effectively it doesn't think I'm logged in as me. Remember, you have to make sure that you can only push to things that you have access to. You're not allowed to so for example, if you're trying this at home, you're not going to be allowed to upload to my repository because you're not me. You don't have access to it. You're not able to make that work. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and fix this problem, or put in my password so you can't see it. So hold on a second. Okay, we're back. So as an aside, my GitHub password changed previously and I hadn't updated on this machine yet, so I had to pause the video in order to basically go remove the old wrong password so that it actually stopped giving me a failed password error message, so I can actually demo what's going on here. So that's what it was. Sorry about that. Again, we're doing it live! Woo! Okay. All right, great. Back to where we were. So we're going to try to push this to my repository. So I'm going to run git push. It's going to prompt me for my username and password because I don't have these things saved locally. You can save this locally, so it won't. So basically, it'll always remember who you are and what your password is. I highly recommend you do that. There's some instructions in the course text about how to set that up. But I'm going to put in my username, which is Joel W. Ross. I'm going to put in my password. So hold on one second. All right, so password put in, and I hit go, and the results you can now see out here is that after I put in my password, it basically went ahead and uploaded all this content. It says that it wrote it all to the web, and once it does that, it means it's now finished uploading and everything has been pushed out to GitHub so that I can then go to my repository. I can then refresh the page. And once it's refreshed, we now see that now my changes are online. It tells me that there was now a commit that was made 6 minutes ago, which is about the beginning of the video, and there's now 3 commits. So we basically now managed to update our changes and get that information pushed onto GitHub to be able to use it. So again, as I mentioned previously, you're only able to actually, and now seeing this happen, passwords become a big thing. But you've only seen that you're only able to actually push to repositories that you have some kind of access to, that you effectively have ownership to, effectively ones that have your name in them. Not the name. I mean, they don't necessarily need to have your name, but they're ones that are under your account or under an account that you have access to. In this class, so there's lots of ways to be able to create repositories and get ones that you have access to. In this class, the way that we're going to generally be doing that is by using a system called GitHub Classroom. GitHub Classroom is a service that GitHub provides designed primarily around education that basically makes it easy for students to be able to create sort of assignment-based repositories. So the idea is you'll create a new repository on GitHub for every assignment that you do, which you can then clone down to your local machine to be able to work with. So the way that GitHub Classroom is going to work is you're going to go to, you're going to be provided with a URL for the assignment. These are generally going to come from something like Canvas or maybe from Ed. And when you click on that link, it'll take you to a page that's going to look like this. We're going to be asked to accept the assignment. We're going to basically say that, yes, I would like to complete this assignment, because you do want to complete that. So you're going to have to hit this big green button that says accept the assignment. And then what it will do is it will go ahead and create a repository for you, and they'll tell you that's what it's doing. It'll then show you where that is, so that if you then click on that link to that repository, oh, I'm not logged in. Damn it! All right, now that I'm logged in, it'll take you to that page, which you can then see that now it's created a new repository for me, and this is the same sample example repository, but it's under a repo that now has the name example, because that's the sort of stem that we put together, with my username after it. So that because this has my name in it, I know that's one that I'm allowed to push and allowed to be able to access to. This is stored inside of our course repository. So because this is a repository that has my name, it means that I'm going to have access to it. I'm going to be able to interact with it. And also, you'll notice that I couldn't immediately get in. I couldn't get into originally without being logged in. That's because this repository is private to me, because it's my repository. So that means that other people can't see it. So this is where I can put my code and I can put my homework. I don't have to worry about anyone else trying to read off of that or see how that works. And so that's again. So that's the process here. Is you're going to click that accept button. That'll get you your repository on GitHub. You can then again use the clone link in order to be able to clone that repository to your local computer. Do your work. Add. Commit. Then push your code to get it back up onto GitHub, and that's how you'll be able to then share that code back with the teaching staff to be able to have things work. And that's the basic process of how we're going to use GitHub. I'm going to note that Classroom can be a little bit finicky. It occasionally stalls out. Like sometimes repos don't quite get created. It can have potential errors. If you hit, it's getting better, but it can still have problems. If you have any issues with it, please let us know, and we can fix the problem without too much detail. But you have to let us know there's an issue. Great. But yeah, so that's the basic process. So again, accept the assignment, clone the repo, do your work, committing as normal, and then use git push to upload it. And that's about how we're going to interact with GitHub. And as always, if there's any questions, please let us know.